Timothy Spall reads from Winston Churchill's second Ministry of Health speech delivered on the 8th of May, 1945.
My dear friends, this is your hour. This is not a victory of a party or of any class. It's a victory of the great British nation as a whole. We were the first in this ancient island to draw the sword against tyranny. Every man, woman and child in the country had no thought of quitting the struggle. When shall the reputation and faith of this generation of men and women fail? I say that in the long years to come, not only will the people of this island, but of the world, wherever the bird of freedom chirps in human hearts, look back to what we have done and they will say, do not despair. Do not yield to violence and tyranny. March straight forward and die, if need be, unconquered.
May this torch for peace be a reminder of all those who sacrificed their lives with no thought of quitting the struggle. Let it be a symbol for the future. We thank you and all those that have served.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Thank you and your generation for securing our freedom 80 years ago. May I have your permission to start the parade, sir, please?
Carry on, sir.
Alan Kennett made the papers in 1944 when he bumped into his dad in Normandy. And now he's just started the 80th VE Day commemoration procession in the statue of his wartime leader, Winston Churchill, and shortly in the presence of His Majesty the King, the Garrison Sergeant Major.
Good morning, sir. Please may you start the parade.
Thank you, Garrison Sergeant Major.
Thank you, sir.
So, the events of the last 40 minutes have led up to this. Everyone had to be brought onto parade in smart style to get underway, and they will march up Whitehall, turn left at Trafalgar Square, under Admiralty Arch, up the Mall to Buckingham Palace. And I'm delighted to be joined now by historian and podcast prince, James Holland. Hello, James.
Good morning, Paddy. What a day.
What a day it is indeed. And how are you finding the echoes of history?
Well, they're all there, aren't they? I mean, seeing so many famous regiments and units of the British Army, and of course, to see so many Commonwealth troops as well. It's a reminder of the fact that victory in the Second World War was brought by a coalition. And as you rightly pointed out earlier on, Paddy, Britain was never alone. Britain had her empire, her dominions, and all those countries answered the call.
Now, the King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery, how did it get its name, James?
Well, it was at the end of the Second World War, and King George VI realised that the world was becoming mechanised and there was no more horse artillery, and thought it would be nice to have a horse troop saved for special commemorations and high days, and so created the troop on the 17th of April 1946.
And it's now those important reminders of our past from that First World War are going past the balcony where Winston Churchill made his famous speech that we've just heard a line from. And what was the importance of Churchill himself?
Well, I think it's kind of hard to say just how enormous his influence was, but it was huge. I mean, what Churchill brought was vision, leadership, drive, dynamism, energy. I mean, how often have people said in recent times, where's the leadership? Well, Churchill absolutely brought it. He also made people believe that
Katie Nichol. Hello, Katie.
Hello.
How are you enjoying the day?
Oh, it's wonderful, isn't it? I think it's, it won't just be us tuning into this to see these wonderful images. It will be around the world because I think here in Britain we do pomp and pageantry and procession and all of those wonderful P's.
Who's on
brilliantly. And well, at the moment it's the Walesers, and of course I think we've just gotten so used to seeing the Wales children here at events like this. Prince George and Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, and of course the King and Queen. I mean, let's not forget this is the royal family, but this is a military family at its heart, with links that span back to the military and this community many centuries. So I don't think you could expect an important day like today, the 80th commemorations of the E-Day, without the monarch. The presence is absolutely front and central to it.
And what is the significance of seeing all three children of the Prince and Princess of Wales? There's the Princess Royal. What's the significance of having the next generations?
Well, I think it's exactly that, Paddy. It is that sort of promise of the future. I mean, we're talking about so much history and heritage in today, but seeing the Wales children represents the future. I mean, let's not forget that when Prince George becomes king, he will, of course, be head of the armed forces. That is a role he will inherit.
Now, the princess, I read, is the first one under the law change to have her rightful place in succession. Previously, the men beat the girls.
That's right. Terribly unfair. And there will be no leapfrogging this time around. In fact, one of the things that the late Queen Elizabeth II ensured was that Princess Charlotte would retain her position in the line of succession. And I feel that, seeing the Princess of Wales here and her children, it sort of reflects a very modern monarchy. That's what we're seeing. So I think most people would agree it's absolutely right that Princess Charlotte retains her position in the line of succession. But this is, as much as this is about remembering the past, honouring those traditions, I think when we see the Wales children, it's very much a promise of the future.
And what can be said about King George VI? It's an important moment, James, to recall the wartime monarch.
Absolutely, and in my humble opinion, he's one of the greatest monarchs we've ever had. He's the first monarch to change the nature of the monarchy from the people serving the monarch to the monarch serving the people, and that's a really important change.
And do you think that's the way that the family changed from his daughter and to her son? Do you think that's the style he set?
Absolutely. Well, we know that Her late Majesty adored her father and was very influenced by him, and I think absolutely she brought his style of monarchy to her own reign, and you see King Charles doing exactly the same as well.
And Katie, when we see the continuous link between the royal family and the military past and the present, it's also, for me, of my generation, you can't escape feeling that Her late Majesty the Queen is here in some way.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, and this is, of course, the first time that we've seen the King at the E-Day commemorations taking the lead, taking the helm, because, of course, we're so used to having seen the late Queen Elizabeth most recently at the 75th commemorations, and, of course, if you think back, we were during those times of COVID, it was all socially distant, so there is that sense of continuity, and I think, as James said, that sense of duty that it is in their DNA, it is part of who they are, and that sense of duty before self, which very much started with King George VI, which continued in the late Queen Elizabeth, and which continues today in King Charles's reign.
The other thing I think is really important about King George VI was he was the first British monarch to set foot in North America and visited Washington in the summer of 1939, and it went down an absolute storm. The Americans just loved him, and of course this was going to be a very important PR exercise for what was to come.
Now, would I be risking myself if I said I think I've been to the home of the wartime American President FDR and seen the bedroom where the King and Queen slept? Could I be right in remembering that?
You could be, yes.
Yeah, I'm testing myself, shouldn't I? I should leave it to you. Now we're looking at the veterans here, and this is Joy True we've just seen His Majesty talking to. And she joined the women's, there she is, she joined the Women's Junior Air Corps. She's 98. She remembers teenage boys in the Air Corps eager to fly and join up. She thought, I can do this. She didn't want to work in a factory as her sister had done. She enlisted in the Women's Auxiliary Air Force when she was 17 years old, and her father wasn't pleased, so didn't sign her papers until the night before she had to return them.
And there's a real fondness, there is a genuine, authentic connection here that means as much, I think, to the royal family as it does to the veterans.
And a reminder that there will be a tea party in the grounds of Buckingham Palace with the veterans, around 50, up to 50. We hope they're all on parade today, having their main lifetime achievement recalled in the grounds of Buckingham Palace. James, here we are, the Commonwealth flags once again. And I know you wanted to remind us that that line, Britain stood alone, we really should rewrite it.
Yes, absolutely. It's extraordinary, the effort of the Dominions and the Commonwealth forces. I mean, don't forget, India had the largest volunteer army ever in the history of the world. Canada...
For you to see the Ukrainian detachment, what's so significant today?
Well, it shows that, where we put our kind of moral compass in this current fight at the moment between Ukraine and Russia. It shows that we're right behind Ukraine, standing behind Ukraine, quite right too. We in Britain feel that we fight for freedom and democracy, liberty, and we have a disregard for repression. And it's terrific to see them there.
I can't help thinking, if you'd told me at the 75th anniversary of VE Day that a Ukrainian detachment would be marching up the Mall, that I wouldn't have known, I couldn't have predicted why.
No, it's one of the great tragedies, isn't it? And it's a reminder of the fragility of the peace in which we live. We need to cherish it and appreciate, as we do on this day, the incredible sacrifices that were made 80 years ago to keep Europe pretty much peaceful for 80 years.
Because the generation we're celebrating gave us a rules-based order. Many of the institutions that were set up in the 1945 and onwards were by these people who'd seen the conflict of the Second World War.
Yes, absolutely. And the visions of peace that those leaders in the West particularly brought forward, a new economic system, a new global economic order, notions of furthering democracy have been with us for the past 80 years. So it's not just about winning the war, it's also about winning the peace. And history shows us that when you get the peace right, it's a lasting peace. When you get the peace wrong, it tends to be over pretty quickly.
That's very chilling to hear that summary from you there, where we know the headlines today. Let's just take in some of the sights and sounds. The procession is underway, and it's interesting the timing of it. No one who's left Parliament Square has yet reached Buckingham Palace. It's a reminder of how this procession is moving. The King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery and the mounted band behind. Now let's have a word about these again with His Majesty. And to your point, Katie, the King is relaxed with people who basically are of his mother's generation. Is she a veteran too?
100%, and he will be. Well, obviously we can't hear what they're saying, but he will be listening to these stories. He will be, I think, very keen to meet with many veterans, of course, some of whom he has met before, and that Buckingham Palace garden party a little bit later on will be another opportunity for these stories to be shared and these very important tales to be told and retold. And it makes me think back to those images. And of course, actually, we should also point out the Queen, of course. We talk about the royal family and its links to the military. But of course, Queen Camilla has her own links to the military. Her father, Major Bruce Shand, he served in the Second World War in the Battle of Dunkirk. Indeed, he was a prisoner of war in Germany. And I think one of the times that we see the Queen most moved and deeply affected.
The King's Troop Royal Horse Artillery. At the end of the war, how much of a fighting force was the United Kingdom? How ferocious have we become?
very good, and I think that there's often a sort of narrative that suggests that Britain was somehow sort of hanging on the shirt tails of the Americans and sort of got lucky at various times, but actually it was a very, very proficient armed forces by the end of the Second World War, and really from kind of halfway through the war, I think. You know, on air, and the air, on land, and particularly at sea, Britain was very, very efficient, ruthless, and protracted the war with enormous efficiency, I would say.
I mentioned it's a tri-service.
And again, you know, we can't resist taking a look at the Wales children, and I think, you know, this will be a very important moment for them. Of course, we've seen them at important occasions. I think most recently, I think people will remember seeing the three children at the coronation. Look at Prince George there, and he was only 9 when his grandfather was crowned. He had that very important role as master page to the king. He is witnessing these historical moments unfold, and I suppose with a level of understanding that one day it's going to be him being head of the armed forces. Of course, his father before that. But this all feels very much like tutelage, from a very young age. That very important sense of learning, and he's learning by witnessing, learning by watching these moments, understanding very important.
Scotland the Brave, let's listen in to the pipes and drums. Now, just behind the pipes and drums, we're looking at the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry, a historic organisation, one of the most decorated female units in the world, and there they are, major contribution to the war in the field. They worked mainly in France. They're walking shortly towards both on the home front and in service.
Well, it was actually huge. By June 1944, at the time of D-Day, there were 467,000 women in uniform and a further 1.635 million working in the armaments industry, which represented about a third of the workforce. So a huge contribution. Over 73,000 Wrens in the Navy, 199,000 in the Army, 174,000 in the RAF, and 19,500 nursing, of which about 6,000 were fannies. And of course, of the 50 women that were sent to France as couriers and agents, 39 of them were fannies.
And the pipes and drums and the drums and pipes are reaching the Women at War Memorial. There it is. Let's just listen to the pipes and drums and reflect on this monument.
It's also worth pointing out, as we talk about women and the role that they played in the war, of course, the late Queen Elizabeth served, didn't she, in the Second World War. She trained as a mechanic. She was only 18 years old at the time, a mechanic and a military driver, and she served with the Auxiliary Territorial Service. And again, it was very much that idea of not just wanting to support the military, but actually carrying out that duty, working, wanting to be a part of it, which the late Queen Elizabeth exemplified.
Yeah. How he spent Green Park lying on the lap of a gorgeous girl, looking up at the leaves and the sky and having champagne poured into his mouth.
Well, that's victory in one little symbolism. And more on the Queen's story, which we've been researching here, when she was a princess with the people, a princess in the crowd. They came back to Buckingham Palace and they joined the crowd calling for the King and Queen to make another balcony appearance. Of course, that was her mother and father. And she later recalled that as they came out, it wasn't completely accidental, because she'd sent a note in to say, would you come out now? And they surely did.
Well, they did, and the Queen did describe that sort of impromptu night, as it was, as one of the most memorable nights of her life, because of course it would have been. She got to see the celebrations from a completely different perspective, and you know they joined those street celebrations. And reportedly, they even joined a conga line through the Ritz with other revellers. So to have that sort of wonderful experience, I'm sure, did stay with her for her whole life, and of course that she managed.
1945, listening to Sophie and her guests, so important to remember the war is so painfully still going on.
Yeah, it's just the totality of it. I mean, it's incomprehensible now that the whole nation was geared to fighting this war.
And it didn't end on this day.
It didn't end on this day. It ended. It ended on the 15th of August 1945 with the surrender of Japan, and then the final ceremonies were on the 2nd of September 1945 on the decks of the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, and then there were subsequent surrenders in the Philippines and elsewhere, and China on the 3rd of September 1945, and then that was it. But what a different world it was then.
I'm hearing the crowd applaud the Ukrainian detachment. You can see, look over there on the far side of the map.
And their march is the absolute antithesis of the Russian gooseneck, isn't it?
Yes, I can picture it. Now you make it. Now you make the contrast. In fact, listening to the archive of the time, and a reminder that the UK fought with the Soviet Union, and one of the reports I was listening to of a Canadian commentator in Piccadilly sees Royal Navy servicemen climb up a lamppost like monkeys, he describes them, and plant a British flag and a Soviet flag at the top of the lamppost in Piccadilly, James.
Well, we were very suspicious of communism and the rise of the Bolshevik states in the late 1930s, and all our prejudices seem to be confirmed with the invasion of Poland by the Soviet Union in September 1939, which of course happened just a couple of weeks after the Nazis had invaded on the 1st of September. But after Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, we changed our tune a little bit. And
Navy losses, the main Navy achievements of the Second World War, those 6 long years, James.
well, the losses were enormous, from the losses at Dunkirk through to, we remember HMS Hood that Ross Kemp was talking about, his relative was involved in that. Prince of Wales in the Pacific and the repulse. The Malta convoys, of course, that lifeline to the tiny Mediterranean island that was so important to the entire Mediterranean campaign. But the triumphs were many, and not least winning the Battle of the Atlantic with the help of the Americans, but also, particularly, it should be said, the Royal Canadian Navy, who rose from 3,500 strong in 1939 to the 4th largest navy in the world by the war's end, and having 10,000 Royal Canadian troops, servicemen on D-Day alone, played a huge part. And the Battle of the Atlantic is really the most important and consequential theatre of the entire Second World War. And the Royal Navy was just superb. I mean, it was just an example of military excellence, and I think we take it for granted, and it's harder to go and visit the sites that the Royal Navy had some of its greatest triumphs. I mean, not many people are going to go and cross the Atlantic and think about the mid-ocean gap in the same way that you can go to the beaches of Normandy, for example. But let no one forget, the Royal Navy in the Second World War was absolutely immense. In terms of seamanship, in terms of gunnery, in terms of skill, of mind.
Tell me the brooch that the Queen is wearing, Katie.
Yes, this is an important brooch because she's wearing the brooch of her father's regiment. Now, of course, Major Bruce Shand was Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Lancers. I'm so sorry, the Queen is now Colonel-in-Chief of the Royal Lancers, which of course was her father's regiment. So very significant for her to be wearing that brooch today. She'll be, I would imagine, wearing it with a great sense of pride. This is a really important regiment to her. It's got that personal collection, and of course she is Colonel-in-Chief.
So we're looking at the army contingent, and it's a reminder to me of the length of this parade. 1,300 individuals from the three armed services, the civilian uniformed services, the cadets. And if you've been kind enough to join our programme over the last couple of hours, you'll know that this parade assembled more than an hour ago to bring this absolute precision, and it's all leading up really to a fabulous fly past. And I imagine even now, to get the timings right, the Air Force will be taking off to get everything right in timing. And James 34 Squadron RAF Regiment is a specialist unit established in 1951, originally to provide ground defence for airfields. It's a highly trained force which can deploy globally to protect air assets in high threat environments. Let's turn our attention to the record of the Royal Air Force. I'm thinking myself of Bomber Command, the famous planes that one of which we're going to see go overhead. What should the Royal Air Force record be for our viewers today?
Well, the RAF was exemplary in the Second World War. It was an absolutely key part of Britain's defensive system, built up in the late 1930s. We had the first fully coordinated air defense system anywhere in the world, which is one of the reasons why we resisted the Luftwaffe in the summer of 1930. And this was all part of the kind of steel, not our flesh policy. The idea to use global reach, mechanization, modernity and industrialization to do a lot of the hard yards so that our frontline servicemen didn't have to. And although there was a huge sacrifice in terms of the men who took part in Bomber Command, the skill of the pilots and the huge sacrifice that they made.
And the Prince of Wales.
Absolutely. I mean, listening to James, you sort of want to look at those images of the Prince of Wales with his son, and of course he's in his RAF #1 uniform. He served with the RAF, with the Search and Rescue Division. Of course, he had his wings presented to him by his father, who also served in the RAF. You've got the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh there. And again, in military uniform, we know that Prince Edward, when he was younger, he served in the Marines. Again, this whole important connection with the military, but certainly when it comes to Prince William, he wears those wings that were presented to him by his father with great pride.
The mass pipes and drums, they're made up from infantry soldiers of the Foot Guards Battalion. The Irish Guards, the drums and pipes, were formed during the First World War. The first two sets of great Irish war pipes were donated by John Redmond, the leader of the Irish Parliamentary Party, whose son was serving with the regiment as an officer. Let's listen in. Uniformed civilian services who are on parade today, I'll mention in a second. We're looking at the Princess Royal, Katie.
Yeah, she's going to have an important role over these coming days. She is in the Fanny uniform. She's going to be very busy. She's going to the Channel Islands, again, sort of standing in for the monarch, representing the king around Britain during these important days of commemoration, and of course military links that run very deep for the Princess Royal as well. She holds many of her own.
The ambulance service, the St John Ambulance, the British Red Cross, His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, the Women's Royal Voluntary Service, His Majesty's Coast Guard, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary, and 6 representatives of the Merchant Navy proudly walking past the Queen Victoria Memorial and the King on the dais, and James reminding us very eloquently of the role of the merchant navy in keeping us alive. During 1939 to 1945, the events today marking Victory in Europe Day, and James and guests with Sophie reminding us the war did not end on this day. Now, this is one of the bands I think I saw first in the whole day. It's the band of the Boys and Girls Brigade. Let's listen in to them on their proud day. Girls Brigade is part of a global fellowship all around the world. It's 130 years old, and the groups participating include from the 3rd Ride and 1st Newport Girls Brigade, both from the Isle of Wight. St John Ambulance Cadets, attending Dillenhurst, the St John Ambulance National Cadet of the Year, Now, let me take a moment to tell you what's coming up in our broadcast today. We're so pleased and proud you're joining the BBC coverage today. We're aware that there will be a story in your family, and some of these images will stir that stronger than others. And here are some proud family members braving the chill with a spare umbrella. Hat, always a very good idea. So what's coming up is that the rear of the procession will arrive at the Queen Victoria Monument. The royal family will then go inside Buckingham Palace. They will meet veterans in the garden. And then in just 20 minutes or so, we'll start to see the preparations after the tea party for the fly past, which is coming up in less than an hour from now, with the King leading his family and the nation from the balcony of Buckingham Palace, 80 years on from Victory in Europe Day. The fly past will have 23 aircraft led by a Lancaster bomber made in 1945. James, as we look at the next few months in 1945, so Churchill greets the crowds, we've recalled that moment. And then you'd have to have gone back inside Downing Street with talking about the fighting in the Pacific and Japan and all over the world, and mixing this great celebration with the war that was ongoing.
Yes, absolutely, and the prospect of the looming Cold War as well. I think, relations with the Soviet Union were splintering quite badly by this point as well, so that looming up. So the end of war in Europe brings a whole host of problems, a continent in ruin and disarray as well.
Now, the Major General will call the procession to an end as he approaches His Majesty, the King. I hope you heard, Your Majesty, that concludes the parade. Otto, carrying the Major General, has done a fabulous job. I accused him of being slightly frisky. I should take that back and say that Otto has been exemplary on parade. 1,300 individuals proudly We await the national anthem. We don't want to speak over it, so forgive us if you think we've gone away. We're waiting so that we can hear the anthem.
Well, we have been listening to the sound of the procession and the applause and cheers rippling across the lake here in St James's Park. What a
Evoking what happened several balcony appearances on this day 80 years ago.
No, absolutely. And to see the King and the Queen leading the charge here, stepping out onto the balcony, followed by the Princess Royal and her husband, Vice Timothy Lawrence. Of course, the Waleses and their three little ones making their debut for a VE Day commemoration. This is a very, very important moment. We didn't know if this balcony moment was going to happen, but it feels that it feels right. This feels very much what people expect now. These moments we associate with troopings, with jubilees, and now with the 80th commemoration of VE Day. And of course, the Duke of Kent, who's looking very, very frail, but in his medals, in his military uniform, just making his way over to stand with the Princess Royal.
Right, we are looking at wave one of the fly past. The Lancaster from the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight, built in May 1945. This fabulous Lancaster. James, what is the significance of this beautiful big bird?
Well, it was the mainstay of the RAF Bomber Command. You know, it was the workhorse, could carry a payload of 10 tons, involved in some of the most famous RAF raids of the entire war.
Flown today by Flight Lieutenant Seb Davey and Squadron Leader Ernie Wise. Navigated by Wing Commander Mark McNulty. Wave 2, we're going to look at the Voyager and the Atlas. The Voyager in front, the Royal Air Force's sole air-to-air refueler. The fuel necessary for refueling operations, as well as the aircraft itself, are carried within the tanks in the wings, the centre and even the tail. Flying the Voyager, Flight Lieutenant Jason Olsey, Flight Lieutenant Will Ricketts, Flight Lieutenant Andy Theobald and Sergeant Andy Bird. Behind, we're looking at the Atlas. On the right of our picture, it's an airlift that can carry a 30-ton payload over 2,000 miles. Listen to that thunderous roar. It can land on remote airfields on short or unprepared strips too. Globemaster provides the Royal Air Force with a long-range strategic heavy lift transport aircraft that can operate in support of combat, peacekeeping or humanitarian missions worldwide. Now, you look at the belly of that big bird and you can tell somehow that that's capable of lifting giant forces thousands of miles.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate little Louis, because he will always make a balcony appearance all the more enjoyable, but he really does seem to enjoy it.
Let's hope there's more. We're all looking at the Poseidon in the middle. That is a Marine Patrol aircraft, and on each wing a Typhoon. And the Poseidon has the latest technology to detect, identify and monitor targets above and below the waves. And the Typhoons are from RAF Coningsby in Lincolnshire and one from RAF Lossiemouth in Scotland.
We'll have lip readers on that, don't worry. Give us a minute just to hear exactly what they're saying, but a real moment for the children to be witnessing. Not their first fly past, but this one is special.
Wave 5 of our fly past now. This is the rivet joint in the centre, a dedicated electronic surveillance aircraft. Its sensors within soak up electronic emissions from communications, radar and other systems. And on each wing is the F-35B Lightning, a multi-role next generation of combat aircraft which can operate on aircraft carriers too. Now let me speak in advance of the Red Arrows. We will see 9 Hawks of the Royal Air Force Aerobatic Team and 4 Lightnings. The Red Arrows are led by Red 1, Squadron Leader John Bond. They clear our screens. James, you feel you can. We've shaken in our little perch down here by the boom.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a splendid sight, isn't it? And there's nothing like fast jets and heavy jets going over you to kind of feel the kind of weight of air power.
Well, now, I promised you the national anthem, I think an hour ago, so I was very early in promising you the national anthem. Katie Nichol.
Well, it's a spectacle, isn't it? This is the King's first VE Day commemoration. Of course, we've been so used to seeing our late Queen lead these commemorations. This is the King, this is the Queen, this is the future as well. That idea of continuity, that link with the armed forces, with the veteran community, that means so much to our monarch, to the Queen. A wave there from the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh. Of course, we had 8 balcony appearances 80 years ago. I think that's just one for today.